Uh, Thank you once again for your time. And if I may also thank Indian Sociological Society for this, for arranging and setting up this Zoom link. And once again, on behalf of the Indian Sociological Society and society's current initiative and drive towards uh, building this very rare archival, I would rather call it an academic archive and heritage, to record life and works, particularly of some of the stalwarts and very prominent social scientists in India. Uh, and we are thankful. We are thankful once again to you, Professor Shah, for this time and your willingness to speak to us on this platform and forum. And for our viewers and posterity who would be able to look at this very rare archive, Professor Shah perhaps needs no introduction because he's quite conspicuous by his presence on the academic cartographic map of India and both abroad. Somebody who has been associated with this profession for a very, very long time, and somebody who we had been exposed to while we grew up as students in social sciences, because very often study of social movements is a field with which Professor Ghanshyam Shah was, whose name was associated. So he's somebody who is quite larger than the kind of list of records that one would read out in honor of him. But certainly, those who would probably look at this piece of video in time to come, I welcome Professor Ghanshyam Shah for this round of interview on behalf of Indian Sociological Society, just to quickly sort of give kind of something of an introduction to Professor Shah's presence on the academic map of India, and something which he has very kindly shared with me, with Indian Sociological Society as well, is just a fragment, I would say, of the long record of his achievements, academic journey, and very rich experiences, being very diligent disciple of social science, particularly political science, study of politics, eventually a great researcher and an academic and stalwart, who has been the major positions that Professor Shah had held, had been the National Fellow of ICSSR, National Fellow of Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, Fellow in Resident Netherlands Institute of Advanced Study in Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor in Social Sciences, Center for Social Medicine, Community Health, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, Ambedkar Chair Professor, Lal Bahadur Shastri, National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie, Director and Professor, Center for Social Studies, Surat. He had been visiting professor both in India and abroad. Apart from his stint at Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy and JNU, he was visiting professor at South Gujarat University, Banaras Hindu University and University of Chicago. Member of the governing boards of various research organizations, some of the prominent being Center for the Study of Developing Societies in Delhi and Institute of Dalit Studies, Center for Social Studies, Surat, Center for Action and Research, Ahmedabad. He's somebody who has been recipient of a number of awards and honors, including V.K.R.V. Rao prizes in political science, research, University Grants Commission National Award in political science, Fulbright Award under the United States Educational Service, visiting scholar at UK SOAS from 1976-77. So this is just only the tip of the iceberg. If we look at Professor Shah's publications, quite mammoth. He has got 15 books to his credit, individual authored, most recent being a book which he had shared, very kindly shared with us when we spoke to him last time, which is Caste Class Hegemony and State Power, a study of Gujarat politics, which was published by Routledge in 2026. Among other publications, Democracy, Civil Society Governance, Public Health and Urban Development, Study of Surat Plague. If you remember that epidemic which struck Gujarat, Social Movements in India by Sage, Economic Differentiation, Tribal Identity from Delhi Ajanta Publications, Minorities, Nation Building, Protest Movements in Indian States, Caste Association, Political Process in Gujarat, Politics of Scheduled Caste and Tribes, authored with people such as Breman, K. Sujata, with Professor Breman. He had published Identity Politics, India's Injurious Frame of Communalism, with K. Sujata and S. Thorat, Education Status of Scheduled Caste, K. Sujata, Thorat once again, with Harsh Mandar, others, Untouchability in Rural India, with Manisha Gupta, with I.P. Desai, somebody whose name is associated with social processes, family change, and number of studies in sociology in Western India, on caste conflict and reservations, with Chaturvedi, Gandhian approach to rural development. Comes very closely on his Gandhian approach to rural development is his edited volume on rereading Hind Swaraj, Dalits and State, Caste, Democratic Politics, Dalit Identity and Politics, Social Justice, India's Capitalist Path of Development, Critical Essays, edited volume, and about 5 books under his edited volume as co-editor, and a number of public lectures that he had delivered both in JNU in honor of Professor Tarabin Patel in Gujarat, on democracy, equality and education, 8th Nayak Memorial Lecture, Civil Society and the Poor, Professor A.R. Desai Memorial Lecture at the University of Bombay in 2008, Underprivileged and Communal Carnage, Case Study of Gujarat, 2004 at Amsterdam Center for Asian Studies, and Political Science in India, Discipline, Intellectual Pursuit at Pune, Department of Political Science, University of Pune. So this is just a fragment of this long list that he might have with him, which probably is something that is very deeply integral to his journey as an academic, as practicing social scientist, and somebody who has worked extensively on issues at stake in Indian politics, Indian society, Indian economy, and particularly issues which are very relevant to the understanding of just not India, but of the South continent and South Asia in general. So thank you very much, Professor Shah, for once again your time and your presence on this platform and on this forum, and kindly agreed to be part of this drive towards preserving this academic heritage on the digital media. And one of the things, while looking at even a cursory glance, to at your work, kind of gives anybody, apart from the fact that we grew up reading your books on social movements, gives us a kind of almost strikes us as something as divergent as one's life processes could possibly be. So speaking from that, I was wondering, looking at this wide variety of issues that you have dealt with in print, uh, my immediate sort of curiosity that drives me at the moment is uh, how is it that in one journey, an academic journey, how is it that a mind such as this uh, uh, sort of not only travels in all these directions, but also kind of brings them together into something of a narrative, which kind of becomes one's academic interest. And I'm kind of awestruck by this sheer diversity of interest and diversity of areas that you have worked on. So, what is it that has sort of driven you in this direction where you have tackled all these diverse areas of interest all at the same time? Over to you, Professor Shah.
Thank you very much, Professor Mukhopadhyay, and thank you for Indian Sociological Society for giving me this opportunity. I'm very happy to share whatever I could do. I began my journey in social sciences, not very any theoretical interest, particularly research, but mainly out of a concern with the social problems. So in the 1950s, when I joined the University of Baroda, during my school days, I was active somewhat in the public life, associated with Congress Sevada. And under that influence, this was the Buddha movement, Gandhian movement, and all kind of idealism of the early 50s, soon after the independence. I too were, like others, was influenced by family, middle class morality, of the theme, compassion for others, and that kind of thing. But also by reading of Gandhi's Satyagraha, his biography, and many other things, I wanted to do something. So after my SSC, that time the 11th class, I could have joined medicine and sciences like what we have today, but I prefer to join humanities, faculty of arts. And some of my neighbors were very angry with me that I don't care my parents, and I'm just joining it. But only ambition at that time was to become a teacher. And becoming a teacher is of that period. You are doing something, training students and that kind of a thing. And that's how I joined the Faculty of Arts. The principal subject in political science because of the public activity, but simultaneously secondary was the sociology. At that time, Baroda University, M.N. Srivas was heading the department, and I studied 2 papers as a part of undergraduation. One was taught by Professor A.M. Shah. He just submitted his PhD and he taught me about the caste, Goodyear's book, then family and kinship, Kapadia and others, and under sociology, young teacher Tarun Seth, who later on joined the management kind of a thing. So obviously everybody knows that we all belong to this society and therefore we have some caste and caste relationship. But that was from your upbringing and very narrow idea about it. After reading the Goodyear, uh, I got a larger idea about nature of caste hierarchies and kind of things. Uh, After the graduation, I decided to join the social work. And Baroda University is at that time a good social work faculty. And I got the admission. My professor in political science called me and said, why you want to join social work? So obviously I say that, well, I want to work in the villages, do something for society. So he said that if you want to go to the villages, why don't you join the political science? And at that time, Baroda University introduced a course of empirical studies in lieu of 2 papers in MA. And then my other friend, who was Sivadar, he was not very favorable for professional social work because he felt that it is an American type of a thing. So obviously, I was convinced by Professor Somji, and I joined the department. At that time, it was a batch of 8 students, and each one was given a specific village around the Baroda city. And I was given one village. And before we started, it's a 2 or 3 days, some kind of orientation course, where the professor I.P. Desai gave a lecture about village society, caste, and that kind of thing. But frankly, at that time, I didn't have a so-called hypothesis about it. I had some idea about the village society because I was born in a village. In my young days, I spent time there, so I know the caste and the farias and localities and that kind of a thing. For almost 8 months, 4 to 5 days in a week, 2 days we had the classes. From the early morning, I used to go to the village, returning in the evening. I could have studied the village panchayat as a generally say, its working, its records and that kind of thing. Instead, I thought to talk to people. Through them, know the panchayat. And therefore, I started that kind of a thing. And this was a time where the village studies were almost a fashion. M.G. Bailey studied Orissa, Macrim Marriott study was there. And it was the time where M.N. Srinivas study on Rampura, dominant caste, that was also appeared. So I could read something that, and that really influenced me. During our fieldwork, well-known anthropologist Gluckman, he came and visited, and he spent almost a whole day with us, and I was impressed. So my orientation to research from beginning till I would say that now, obviously I could not do fieldwork because of my age and health, but I have an idea that without doing anthropological study or sociological studies, you cannot get the insight in the social processes. And that's how I studied that village and wrote my dissertation. Later, Professor Somji published a book with our articles. Now, another incident that happened, that as soon as I completed my MA examination, the professor Rajni Kothari, he was my teacher. He was to leave Baroda for a Mussoorie. It was an institute called the National Institute of Community Development. And Professor S.C. Dubey was the director there. That was early Panchayati Raj era. While leaving, he asked me, that what are you doing during the vacation? I said, nothing. Young. I had no idea about what vacation is. Incidentally, my head of the Department of Political Science at that time went to London School of Economics. And while going, he told me that don't work anywhere else. You have a position in the department, because he wanted to do on the village studies. And Somji has, Professor A.S. Somji has done quite a few village studies in Gujarat. So I said, okay, but vacation, he was not there and nothing else to do. So I said, okay. As soon as my examinations over, I got a message from him through a friend from Delhi. They should process to a Sabarkantha district. Sabarkantha is a district and that constituency, parliamentary constituency of Gujarat Nanda. Gujarat Nanda at that time was the planning minister, and Rajni Kothari had some relation with him. And Nandaji wanted to study his constituency as a political leader. So I said yes. After finishing one, I spent one day to prepare my things, and I went to Sabarkantha. And I did it. Then the Kothari provided me some help of some assistance and that kind of thing. So I studied their constituency. At that time, the Kothari and Tarun Seth, the sociologist that I talked to, he did a study on elections of Baroda, community voting of 1962 elections. That was the caste, how the caste influenced voting behavior. I had almost the same model, and as soon as start talking to people, obviously caste comes in this selection of candidates, factions within the Congress party, and so on and so forth. And at that time, the lower caste association was assertive for the first time. This was late 50s and early 60s, and they were demanding it. And they joined Swatantra Party because they didn't get a position in the Congress Party. So that kind of a thing. So I studied that, and then Kothari and Tarun Seth's article was published in Economic Weekly, because previously it was Economic Weekly.
Economic Weekly, right.
Yeah. So I read that, and that was some kind of a model to imitate. I did one assembly constituencies written on it. Kothari asked me to do it. He asked me to visit Mussoorie, so I spent a week with them. So his guidance and it was available. And I wrote a draft paper or report on constituencies. Kothari edited it, and it was published in 1962 in Economic Weekly, Kothari and me. Now, when I started this thing, back of my mind, the caste and voters, but didn't have a very clear hypothesis kind of a thing as mine. But whatever they stuck, that I did that. After completing this, I joined to Baroda University. Because the Professor Somji asked me to join. So he returned back and he asked me to do one village as I did earlier. He liked somehow the village study that I did for my master's degree, dissertation. So I started exploring it and selected one village. After 3 months, I realized that I'm repeating what I've done in 1962 for my MA study. But I wanted to do something. And I felt that so long I remain in Baroda, my frontier of experiences will be limited. So I decided to leave Baroda department. I wrote to Kothari, and Kothari immediately replied, welcome, and he had a project, and he wanted somebody. Uh, I had some problem to get my resignation accepted by Professor Somji. Uh, Understandably, from where the IPDSI helped me, and he finally accepted my resignation. I joined the Kothari. And that was the study of the Panchayat. So we uh, moved in different parts of India, Rajasthan, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and obviously Gujarat, meeting people, meeting village leaders, taluka leaders, and officers. Uh, After that, uh, Kothari asked me to do a Gujarat politics. No, he didn't ask me what kind of a thing. So whatever you feel like doing. And that time the Center for the Study of Developing Society started. So I had an opportunity to join him and did study on state politics. So I did for the first time the archival things. I went to Bombay. I met Professor A. Desai, Nira Desai, because Nira Desai has that time done a work on Gujarat. Uh, and obviously political science, Aruda Stool and Usamet and that kind of thing. Uh, that really gave me different dimensions. I studied the gazetteers. Then the journals published in 19th century, early after the press. And that gave me some insight about the processes. Mm, After doing this thing, later I joined the Center for the Study of Developing Societies. And I was allowed to do whatever I wanted to do. Interestingly, the important is the Center for the Study of Developing Society. From the beginning, and I believe till today, is a unique institution, giving scholars a freedom where you go to the center wherever you like it, you go to the work at home, at library, and that kind of thing. So I had no restrictions. And that gave me an opportunity to read. And during this period, I read a lot of sociological theory. I read the Merton, Weber, and that kind of thing. And partly also I was influenced by another sociologist, D.L. Seth. He joined the center after me, but so talking to him as informal, as a friend, and that kind of thing. And that all influenced me, led me to read sociological theories, which I didn't read during my graduations. I read the political science theory, uh, but not the sociological theory as such. So I read the Merton and structure functions in that time. It was very dominant kind of.
Yes, so this is incredible, Professor Shah, that you had traveled almost all over India in terms of various interests that you wanted to pursue, your sociological, political studies, and in the process, your anthropological imaginations and anthropological curiosity, perhaps, is what this diversity of travels has triggered and perhaps still makes you very vibrant in terms of all your creative works, even till date, 2026, when you came out with this with your book. And something that uh, is almost uh, very closely linked to things that you had just uh, shared with us is this this recurrent interest in caste studies and the people who you came under the influence of, and greatly that the village studies being very significant in those years of particularly the decades of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where anthropological works had produced such volumes on village in India and also caste. Two quick things that I would like to sort of place before your consideration is, uh, do you see that the caste studies has significantly changed from what it was, number one, and has village studies also, not that not that that we live in cities and therefore village studies have become somewhat irrelevant, but do you see any significant changes also in the way in which village studies at one point dominated social sciences? I'm not sort of classifying in terms of political studies, sociology, and anthropology, because you were somebody who had built an interface and you have crossed over and you have moved back and forth across all these different disciplines and their provincial nature. You have broken them successfully, but in the process, do you see that uh, uh, do you see that significant changes have taken place the way you had once looked at caste studies and looked at village and village studies within the context of Indian sociology, politics, and let's put it this way: the society, polity, and economy.
Well, perhaps because of my age and expectations, uh, I'm not very happy with the kind of studies, uh, particularly the village studies of the last 2 or 3 decades, uh, nor even on the caste studies. At one point of time, the caste studies, Andre Patel and all the caste studies, uh, I find it few and far between a good caste studies. Uh, Obviously, changes have taken place, and I have tried my way to look these changes over a period of time. And my last book is almost my culmination of all my experiences there. Uh, Somehow I'm uneasy that anthropological in-based study by the Indian sociologists. Yes, in the past also foreign sociologists did it, but Indian sociologists are few and not very insightful. I would have expected that over a period of time, what kind of a changes that have taken place. For example, Bailey did one 1957, but again he visited in 59 and saw the change kind of a thing. Because society is changing, society is not stagnant. Uh, that kind of anthropological studies, uh, at least I have not come across. In fact, I try to see that. And my first preference is to read the anthropological studies. Uh, and I've done read studies on everyday politics by the sociologists. Uh, and many other things. And that gave me the insight. I would say that I couldn't get that much insight from a political scientist as much as the sociologist. But it was not meeting my expectations. Uh, Partly because uh, the young sociologists perhaps would not like to go to the villages. Go to the village and live there itself is a good experience. Uh, you make you to learn and unlearn about it, adjust with society, listen peacefully without questioning about it. Just listen. Second, during my first village study, under the influence of sociologists, I used to sit on the chora. Chora is a village where the elders spend time and talking, past time. I sit and listening to them. And I got a lot of uh, insight of the village politics, the interpersonal relationships, and all kinds of things about it. So it requires a lot of. It's also possible to spend a whole day and you don't get anything. Uh, Survey is relatively very easy, and then you employ and can. Uh, so, except this Banerjee study, yes, Banerjee study, who did on the India votes of the West Bengal village, I couldn't get such, and this was very good study, and I read it twice, and I tried to use it also. Such kind of studies, neither from sociologists, and obviously not from a political science, because the political science has not that kind of approach to study politics. But that is my difference with them. But that's a different kind of a thing, because survey research really dominates now. Perhaps because easy kind of a thing. So, insightful studies of changing villages are few and far between. I could not listen you.
Yes, sorry. Yes, this is something that that we all knew, that political science is slightly latecomer in terms of this kind of very in-depth, social research on the field, uh, from being largely a theoretical exercise, that it had taken some time to get into this habit of doing field research, which has often become a kind of a practice within political science. But interestingly, you have broken this at the very, very outset and very early on, and particularly your interest in social movements, which is one area where we had known for a very long time that without a grounded understanding of social movements and some kind of an experience of being in the field, which we often call being there, out there as social researcher, uh, that any understanding of, or any conceptualizing of social movement would be incomplete in some sense. And therefore, your books on social movements, and something with which we as students had somehow been, trained in and exposed to, that social movements in India, please look up Ghanshyam Shah's book on social movements. And if I now look at this whole field of social movements, the domain of social movement, and my immediate kind of question, which I'm kind of tempted to ask you, is do you see a significant change that has also taken place in the study of social movements from a time when you had looked at social movements? And today, particularly the kind of identity politics on which you have also written. And I would like to think of these as two distinct areas, that social movements and identity politics. And how do you respond that is it that are we increasingly in an age of identity politics as far as understanding India is concerned, uh, away from social movements? And my kind of related question would be, then what is happening to social movements in an age of social media and digitization, where even those early generations of social movement theories, and then the idea of new social movements and the kind of theorizing that had come in, and where do we stand today in your opinion, uh, if one were to look at social movements, conceptualize, understand, when identity politics seems to be gaining a very significant ground, and secondly, what happens to this whole idea of social movement when we had an idea of a collective, which is slightly getting broken down into something of an atomization of parts when we are increasingly in a digitized atmosphere, in a climate of digitization? Those are the two kind of related questions which I'm kind of tempted to ask you.
Uh, I really like your questions. Uh, and again, uh, I started studying movement out of my concern rather than very theoretical thing. Uh, while I was doing my PhD on the caste association, I closely observed the political mobilizations uh, of the upper caste who was dominating that caste association to have-nots, the agricultural laborers, and kind of a symbols, idioms were using about it as a unity. Uh, so after completing my PhD, uh, I thought that let us understand it, what happened in the past. Uh, now, how during the freedom movement, people were mobilized. This was a curiosity out of my PhD thesis. Uh, and I thought to study a Bardoli Satyagraha. That was in 1928. Began with
Yes.
23 and
Yes.
postponed it again 28. And fortunately, the archival material of Bardoli Satyagraha was available in Surat. Uh, so the question that I had in mind of doing this thing, how the apolitical people uh, were mobilized for such a struggle against the British, and how the people of a different strata were really organized as a one. Because the problem began with the small strata of agriculturalists whose revenue government was increased. To oppose this thing, the whole satyagraha was there. Earlier there was a Kheda satyagraha in Gujarat against almost similar problem, which I didn't study, but later on David Hardiman studied on that kind of thing. But when I did these things in David Hardiman's study was not available because he did it in 70s. So I went to Surat, said there, looked the archives. And at that time, IPSI was in Surat. So his guidance was also obviously available. And I did and written on the Bardoli Satyagraha, caste mobilizations of traditional society, and later on published a contribution in Indian sociology. And I could find that how the traditional Indians were used by the leader, the Sardar Patel, who was the leader of that. So in fact, after the Bardoli Satyagraha, he became the Sardar. because it was uh, ably done by him. And so he was called Sardar later on. I also met some of the leaders who were just dead alive. So some of them were living in Bombay, some in Navsari and that kind. I went there and asked them to recollect what they did about it. And obviously, I found that they used the traditional idioms, traditional bonds, which reinforce, but used against the British. So tribals were, say, Sardar Patel and local leader invoked the Gandhi as a god, tribal god. You can see the Gandhi in the veil, and that kind of thing. Or relationship between the landlords and the agricultural laborers, where Sardar called it a relationship as a Prativrata Stri, a devoted wife, and to the husband, that kind of. So he asked agricultural laborers that your devotion and that struck me. I had no idea of that kind of a thing that happened. So out of a curiosity, I went in and I did this thing. Now, second collective actions, by the time I finished it, there was a communist riot in Ahmedabad in 1969. At that time, I was CSDS, and we were getting news. Kothari, me, DL Seth, and all the three Gujaratis were asking ourselves how this could happen in Gujarat. And it was a large scale riot and continued for several days. So I volunteered that I will go and see what has happened to them. So I volunteered and came and spent time, first at least saw the police records, newspaper records, and then interviewed people of both the Hindus and Muslims. I was fortunate to get some of the respondents who claimed that they were the participants in the riots of killing Muslims. After the first phase, I decided to go to the Muslims and talk to them. And frankly, and that's what I wrote when DE published it, because of my own upbringing, I had a strong prejudice against the Muslim community. And my locality in Baroda was adjoining the Muslims. So we had the Muslims are the brutals, unreliable, they can kill any time, anybody in that kind of a thing. So I had to really collect my courage to go to the Muslims and get an interview, and in this sensitive time. But the responsibility to the researcher comes in. See, so I somehow collected my courage and interview. I interviewed in Baroda, Ahmedabad. And once you started interviewing one or two, you get the courage. You feel, oh, they are just like us. And then I wrote article which published in Economic Weekly in 1960. Now, again, this happened that led me to understand the collective actions about everything. The similar kind of a thing when 1972 I left CSDS and I went to Surat. I just started and he wanted somebody. And incidentally, he was my examiner of my PhD, he and Andre Patel. So he jokingly said that I would pass you if you agree my conditions. And his condition that I should join Surat. And at that time I was thinking that let us not concentrate in Delhi and go and do something in Gujarat. That was also and he was knowing about them. So I decided to join them. And that really helped me, my interaction with IPSI, because he was not my teacher. So I was, and he was a dean, and so everybody was fearing him when I was studying. Uh, so I met a different kind of a person. During that period, I came into contact with Professor A.R. Desai of Bombay University, sociologist. Uh, and my interaction with them, uh, A.R. Desai actually conducted one workshop. You know that A.R. Desai was the Marxist, so
Yes, yes,
active Marxist. Uh,
yes.
so he asked me, and somebody asked me to go, and out of curiosity, at that time I had a very strong prejudices of the Marxist and communist, because I believe that because of my socializations in Congress, and partly because of CSDS
Uh,
influence also, uh, uh, that communists are the brutal, don't believe in democracy, and that kind of a thing. But I curiosity just want to know about it. So I attended it. From my IPS, I have one thing that I distinctly remember, and I think all along may help me. One is that there are stratifications in the caste. Castes are not homogeneous. The whole idea of a stratification within a community really struck me. So when I did tribal studies uh, in the 72, 71 elections, that really helped me. But doing their studies, I learned the dialectical materialism for the first time. These ideas are the interactions of material conditions and mind, rather than the morality from above. So that's the first time I began to shift from an idealist position to a materialist position. And all great credit goes to IP and A.R. Desai. IP was not uh, that Marxist, but he was inclined Marxism. So that kind of, he was just asking me why this is happening about it. Because when I went to Surat, I had a project on urban tension. And part of the urban tension, I went to the local communities. And my earlier uh, training or concern to go to people and talk to them rather than have a survey. So I said one day, and talking to the laborers who were drunk and that kind of thing,
uh,
uh, I shared with IP. The IP said that you should find out why they are drinking. This is a bad habit. Why is this bad habit for them? Why in the evening they drink? That led me to visit the factories, kind of a work that they're doing, and all kinds of things. Then I realized that morality is not coming from within. A kind of a situation, kind of environment that one is forced is closely related to this thing. Uh, so for the first time, I would say that it was absent for my 10 years was the economic factor uh, uh, in my study. When I did a village study uh, in 1962 or election studies, that was not striking to me. Even in my PhD work, the caste association, that came but slightly. I didn't pay much attention to the agricultural laborers and the landlords. And the landlords were mobilizing the agricultural laborers in the name of a caste and using the Sanskritizations and that kind of thing. After talking to these people and thinking and discussing with them, uh, the class for the first time came in my writing. Uh, and I, for the first time, I wrote for a Gail Amway. She edited a book uh,
Right. Yes.
of the Delhi University where I agrarian caste relations, if you would. Uh, so when I went to Surat, uh, class was really bothering me. That why and how can we ignore this kind of thing? Now, this was a time when uh, Gujarat witnessed a student movement, and that was 1974. Uh, so I studied the Bardoli Satyagraha, then communal rights, and then curiosity of the students' mobilization. And at that time, the theory was a gap between students and their guardians, the second generation. So, out of curiosity, I carried out a survey of students, how their views and values differ from their parents. I didn't find much except about the sex, meeting opposite sex. Their differences are there. But on the social values, I found almost the same kind of thing. And at that time, this movement took place. So I decided to study. Uh, I also closely observed through my friends in Surat, because the student movement was the whole Gujarat movement. It started from Ahmedabad, and also Surat was one active place about it. Uh, and I found it shift in their agenda from a price rise and economic issues to the corruption. And that intrigued me to probe further. And that led me to interview students. I went to Ahmedabad. Uh, at that time, we didn't have a funds for this kind of thing, but just a curiosity. And it's only traveling, and then you can stay with somebody and that kind of thing. Anyway, I interviewed students, and I found that uh, they were sharing the same middle class values, and then probe that how the problem of price rise and scarcity turned to a corruption of a chief minister, which incidentally succeeded in removing the chief minister. Not only that, for the first time in Indian history so far, the assembly was prematurely dissolved. So it's a landmark achievement as far as the students is concerned. And interviewing students, I found that how different forces in the society enter into and manipulate it. The ABVP was the first who diverted from economic issues to the moral issues. The teacher students association, they were against the Chief Minister Chiman Patel because he was a political leader. So they diverted into it. So it was easy for students to get diversion about it. And the whole agitations diverted to that. And JP Jayaprakash Narayan came there.
Yes.
Many liberals supported and revolution in the country. But I didn't find the revolution. I found it a protest and how the social forces manipulate the collective actions or anger of the students. Students were angry about many other things, but how they diverted. Kind of. While I finished my write-up and I sent to Economic Weekly, that time the EPW, Economic and Political Weekly,
Yes. Yes.
by that time, and EPW serialized the articles. And that gave me confidence. So young age, something happened and you get some kind of a recognition. It adds your confidence kind of a thing. Uh, Almost by the end of this movement, the JP movement Bihar was launched. JP was the leader about it. Now, during this period, my Gandhian ideology, I was revisiting it. Because during my young days, I was a Gandhian. I had same influence with the CSDS, and but my ground, take how the Gandhian ideology can help. Now, I had several friends, Sarodeva friends, who were actively involved in decentralization planning. Decentralization planning in 1960s was in a vogue. Yeah, everybody was talking about decentralized planning, and they were, including Rajni Kothari. Uh, and I found that what are the constraints there while talking to that? And increasingly realize that these people working with this ideology, which I also said at that time, uh, ignore the larger forces that influence the society. And unless you don't address that, uh, you cannot solve the problem. So I was questioning kind of a thing, uh, and I was doing a study on evaluation of Gandhian uh, organizations of that planning kind of a thing. So I was started questioning Buddha movement through which I was influenced in the 50s. I began to questioning about it. The Gramdan movement and district movements and kind of a thing. What is happening to that at ground level? And I found that idealism of JP initially impressed me, then began me to raising the questions. So I decided to study the Bihar movement. So that was end product of a study of Gujarat movement. But for go to the Bihar, you require some finances because at least travel and stay there and that. I applied to ICSSR, and fortunately, for a short time, I could get there. So I went to Bihar and I stayed about 4 or 5 months. I met to GP, I met to political leaders, including President Lalu Prasad and others also at that time, because they were all students at that time. Uh, and then I wrote on JP movement, and I was very critical of that thing. Because I found that as the Gujarat students were diverted from economic issues to the moral issues, JP, because JP movement started with the economic issues of the students' mass bill, became the corruption issues, and Indira Gandhi is a symbol of corruption and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Then I studied, read lot, documented about the Buddha movement and his claim for country, and I could see the limitations of this kind of thing. And I could see it, despite the JP's idealism, the internal forces, including the RSS at that time was active there, were manipulating and diverting the movement from a major economic issue to a moral issue. And that moral issues appealed to the middle class. So I wrote a long, almost a 3 articles on that. And again, I sent to EPW. By the time I sent it, emergency was declared. So EPW did not publish it. As soon as the emergency was lifted, I think Krishna Raj was the editor at that time. He serialized that kind of thing. And then it has come out as a book, Protest Movement in Two Indian States, for which I wrote the postscript also. So that also really made me to think really differently and give importance to economic issues about it. Till then, I was an idealist, at the most Hegelian idealist. Now I saw that you have to see the material influence very closely and how the class functions in a society. Uh, and that book was very well received. Uh, these two things, and then there was a anti-reservation agitation. That was the first in country, was in Gujarat in 1981. This primarily focus against Dalits, scheduled caste, but against the scheduled tribe also, merit and that kind of thing. So I wrote on that two articles, again EPW. I think this was the only source that you can publish at that point in time. So publishing. By this time, ICSSR asked me to do a review of social movements because of whatever I have done from a Bardoli, the students' movement, and that kind of thing. I did it, but I crossed the time limit. I could not finish within 8 months or 9 months. I took almost 2 years. I read a lot of things, and for me, the learning, because I read the historical movements, particularly the peasant movements, tribal movements, and others. And that gave me new insight about it. And I submitted my report. Then somebody suggested that why not to publish it. And Tejas was saying, was at that time the proprietor of the Sage at that time. And when I was traveling, he met me. So I just out of exploring it, I sent the manuscript to him, to Sage, and Sage published it. And beyond my expectations, it was well received. So I revised in 2002, and now also several prints and that kind of a thing. But that made me to write the introductions where whatever the theoretical kind of things, that how do we understand what are the aspects of the social movements and that kind of thing. And that remained my interest continuously. So my interest of the village study or empirical studies to begin with, all the social movements, out of the problems that I saw about it, my concern about it, rather than a theoretical kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
And that's continued. Then later on, I did Narda Bachao Andolan movement.
Yes.
So my movement is continued.
Yes. And you know, because I raised this question of what happens to movements in an age when we have so much of identity politics almost taking the center stage, and movements becoming a bit more atomized, kind of disparate, acts in social media. I was also wondering, and that's obviously taking cue from your writings on Gandhi, right? Somebody who you, I mean, by now I have realized that somebody who is very close to your heart, and you're writing on Gandhi and you're revisiting Hind Swaraj. Uh, what would be your understanding of relevance and presence of Gandhi uh, in India today, when we see something of a crisis with which the Indian state is fraught, right? Uh, and does that simply mean honoring Gandhi and remembering Gandhi, or something beyond? You know, uh, and if someone were to do revisiting of Hind Swaraj, uh, and would be very close observant of Gandhi ideas as an expression of one's living and being, how would you understand him today? Particularly when we see a sudden crisis. And I'm particularly reminded of also Ramachandra Ghosh, that magnum opum, that India after Gandhi.
Yeah.
And if I would read yours in conjunction with that, what would be your response to that?
Well, it's very important. It really also bothers me. As I mentioned that I began as a Gandhian. Uh, till my master's degree, I was wearing khaddar and very simple pajama and shirt, and doing washing my clothes and that kind of thing. So it's that period of 1950s. Uh, uh, and I must have read Gandhi's uh, um, Truth, Experiment Truth, several
Yes,
times.
my autobiography.
Yeah. Uh, I began questioning uh, when I came to Surat. Uh, under the influence of IP and then ALSM. And my first departure from Gandhi, as a Gandhian ideology, was from idealism to materialism. That only ideas and only moralities is not enough. We have to some kind of synergize with a morality, with the kind of situation that we have. The culture varies and changes with the material condition. It's not a constant kind of thing. But the Gandhian ideas and all idealist ideas is a constant, is a culture is a constant, unchangeable kind of thing. And that uh, really made me, when I saw this thing, that certain things are not happening at the ground level. And I said you that in the 70s when I went to Surat, these Gandhian friends were doing a decentralization planning and they asked me to evaluate it. And I accepted it because that was the stage of questioning about it. And the JP movement, I did that. So I uh, did done evaluations. I written a book on Gandhian approach to rural development with H.R. Chaturvedi. And I found that despite their honesty, and the workers who were there were from upper caste, but they're living very simple, were not earning, and they are devoted to this kind of thing. And they spent, by that time, they spent more than 15 years for attempting to bring a decentralized planning and decentralized implementation. Uh, I was wondering myself the limitations of this thing, why we are not able to see the results of this kind of thing, what are the constraints. So when they asked me to evaluate it, I accepted it. And fortunately, Jan Breman, he was connected with some Dutch organizations, they supported me. But by that time, I had institutional responsibilities with the center. By that time, I was becoming the director and that kind. So I wanted somebody to help me. And Chaturvedi was my colleague in Surat, Delhi center. He was willing, so we did this study. And I found that decentralized planning is a big idea, but you cannot decentralize it out of the context uh, of the all India kind. Your all India economy is dominated, is concentrated about it. Planning, conceptualized in the planning commission and others are done at all India level. So what you are doing is the implementation. When you find something which is important for planning, you are not encouraged about it. And what are the constraints about this kind of thing? So I read an article which was uh, published by SOAS in one of the books. They invited me to the constraints of a decentralization in a larger economy. So larger economy really influences and delimit kind of a thing. And that made me more striking about limitations of uh, moralist politics or idealist politics about. Uh, and I continued this observe uh, more when I settled in Surat, and more so after my retirement in Delhi 2003. Because Gujarat is a place that you have to start your talk or a lecture with a Gandhi. Because Gandhians are the very influential people. And I had very friends about it. And I found that what are the limitations about it? Because I surprised that when the anti-reservation agitations took place in 1981, and the Dalits were killed, the houses were burned, Gandhians were silent. And I.P. Desai wrote an article in EPWK, and he expressed his anger. What has happened to Gandhi Harijans by the Sarvodaya? Because Gandhi used the word Dalit as a Harijans kind of thing. So these they are not coming out from the caste background or upbringing about it and sharing the same prejudices about it. And increasingly we find that, particularly in Gujarat, but certainly one, the limits, we have not yet realized the limitations of only idealism. Because that idealism has been hijacked by anti-Gandhians to the fullest extent about it. And Gandhians are helpless. Gujarat, the Gandhi established a university called Navjivan, is under their control. And they could not do anything. And after coming to Ahmedabad, and also before one particular, I had a close association with them. So therefore, Gandhi was an idol for prarthana and chanting. They never integrated Gandhi in a different context and see the limitations of that thing. And that happens because if you are just a disciple, uh, uh, then you become the bhakt. And therefore, they succumb to anti-Gandhian forces at the later point of time. And that was the reason why I revisited Hind Swaraj. And I was very critic. And the title is The Outcry
Yes.
of Moralists in a neoliberal economy. Because you talk all kind of things, but you cannot do it. So I like the Hind Swaraj as excellent. I must have read several times of it. But from my close association with it, I began to questioning over a period of time. That how could you do these things if the economy has changed? Because his idea of Hind Swaraj, village economy, and that kind of a thing was a pre colonial kind of thing. And the villages have changed even during the colonial period. And today is a much, and they change it because not the village people have changed it, but because the larger forces compel them to do kind of a thing. So that, so today, with the guardians, with all sincerity, and I have very friends, kind of a thing, they are not able to come out from their idealism. And I'm surprised that during the emergency in Gujarat, the Gandhians were in the forefront against the emergency. The journal of Gandhian, Bhumiputra, Bhudan, Vinobas journal, took a firm stand and opposed the emergency and continued to publish it. So that was a difficult time of it. But
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes,
I don't find this
yes.
today.
Yeah, I do understand that, but in some sense, probably Gandhi also should be remembered with a certain sense of Gandhi's relevance, uh, particularly when we see, that entire idea of community being uh, uh, completely sort of misled into certain directions where the reason why I did also mention Ramachandra Go's book, because it actually put us into the absolutely into the front stage at the time of partition, when Gandhi was gradually withdrawing from the center stage of national politics and going into these villages of Bengal, Noakhali, Bangladesh, and so on, and sort of joining hands with people whose lives were torn apart by the communal riots. And his whole idea of secular, what it means to be secular, something probably uh, sort of should kind of set us rethinking as to where we are today, because that scene probably is somewhat today being restaged on a different way altogether, and which is what makes us all remember him very fondly, and which is why I asked you that what would be your kind of response, and which is kind of leads me to this question that uh, uh, that what do you think would be the role of the intellectuals, academics, social scientists in India today? You know, when you see not a very happy scenario all around, both politically, democratically, otherwise. And this whole idea of a civil society, something that you wrote extensively on, that what do you think would be the role of the intellectuals, social scientists, practicing researchers as very important people inhabiting what we would understand as civil society, right? When things are not quite happy, the climate in which we are working is not absolutely congenial, and so what would be your advice to the future generations of social scientists, your students, people who you had mentored, and also people who you had interacted with, and people who you see today, getting out of the universities as graduates in social sciences? So what would be your advice to them, as and also what would be your kind of take on the role of intellectuals and conscientious social scientists?
Uh, Conscientious social scientist is very difficult to define for me. I'm not pessimistic. I have optimism. Uh, but the reflective thinking uh, is very limited. Uh, and I, I try to answer these things in two of my recent writings. Jan Breman and I did a book on communal identity, and it was delayed by 2 years because of me. Because mostly it was a collection of a published article. But I spent 2 years to read historical material. Again, revisit Gandhi and Gandhian ideology about it. Because I didn't want to do any injustice to it. And if you read the introduction, 2 chapters historical, it tries to give some idea about it. The intellectuals are, we always, I say that when I did a communal rights study, I had the same prejudices which everybody had in Gujarat. The intellectuals are obviously not free from their own life world.
Absolutely.
And how the life world really articulate or strengthen the prejudices kind of a thing, or idea of a society. And there I have a problem with Gandhi, which I didn't have it. Now, and which in the last book also, and earlier also, I try to that during the freedom movement, Gandhi worked, and I think I don't find anybody else in the country who could really work so concerned with these things, and he lost his life because of it. But secularism or a communal harmony does not come only out of preaching, only out of organizing a common prayer. You have to develop a mechanism for that. You know that Gandhi started the public life in the 20s. He introduced the constructive programs. And one of the constructive programs was communal harmony, along with untouchability and kind of thing. But in the communal harmony program, only common prayer, nothing more than that. He did not, neither he nor the Gandhians, interrogated why he failed in the Khilafat movement. That was in 1921. Now, the Gandhians who work in Gujarat, they were working for the Muslims or communal harmony. But that was a chanting, a symbolic, emotional, not the kind of social relationship that it would build about it. And then Gandhi, being a reformist Hindu, he invoked ideas or values among the lower caste, a Brahminical values. Say, and so one of the Gandhian, most committed Gandhian, who sacrificed his whole life, he was working about, say, the dacoits, who happened to be dacoits in our terms, but out of survival they're doing. He worked there and tried to reform them. While trying to that, he realized that what else the people can do. The kind of exploitations that the landed class, the patidars and banjas are doing about it. But thereafter, I mean, he wrote this to Gandhi. Thereafter, he continued preaching them to read the Mahabharata and Ramayana, take a bath in the morning, and all what we call is Sanskritization kind of a thing. The Sanskritization breed the Brahminical values about it. We would like to be like a Brahmin, which that aspect Shiva's ignore about it. But anyway, uh, this is my corollary, that kind of thing. So the lower caste, both the Dalits and lower caste, were Brahminized, Hinduized, and they also carried the prejudices of the upper caste about it.
Mm.
But the aspect of exploitations, Gandhi did not address about it. Gandhi was upset with the communal riots in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad, Surat, and kind of a thing. For me, the puzzle that the Gandhi asked K.M. Munshi. K.M. Munshi was a proponent of Aryan society, and he wrote on that kind of a thing. And in 1940, 43, 45, he was associated with RSS. And he was not in favor of non-violence. And then Gandhi, out of anger, asked Gujarat Congress to ask all those who don't believe in ahimsa, they should resign. And Munshi resigned. But after 3 years, Gandhi admitted him. And I don't know why. And Munshi said that he maintained the same ideas about non-violence. And you know that Munshi became one of the ministers in the Congress government in that kind of a thing. So, communal harmony is just not only a preaching. Preaching is important to begin with, but you
Yes.
require a mechanism of evolving a bond about it, understanding it about it. And that's how he himself failed about it. He could not stop the violence during the partition kind of a thing. And that is what, at least what I observe in Gujarat, and what is true Gujarat is true elsewhere, that the Gandhians till today are impressed by a culture. I, in fact, revisited Gandhi in that or later on. I don't remember where. But I have mentioned that the whole idea of a civilization, a hierarchy of a civilization, are the product of a Machiavellian educations. They conceptualize in hierarchies, the progressive and advanced civilizations and backward civilizations. They were the first who really discovered and popularized Vedas, Max Muller and others. So the Orientalism and this form is a product, or at least I would say influence, of the British education. We should also remember that in 1957, after this Viplav, British government changed the policy and started the census. And reconstituted the caste. And so historian Dirks have done excellent work on this.
Yes.
How this is that tells us that we did these things in a larger dominance framework about it. And I, in fact, I have done little more detail in my recent book that 1857 were the largest community of Gujarat, constituted 40%, and now they are the OBC, uh, Colis. The first writing on the caste in Gujarat, Nati Nibandh, was written in 1954 by one of the poets who was the advisor to the collector, who wrote a book on Gujarat history. And he wrote that book that these coolies and tribals were the local people. And we came, and he meant the we meant upper caste came here and made them a slave. And now we have made them a lower caste. So we have not integrated this history in our own way. I am a critic of Macaulay, but kind of a history that writing we have learned from them. The first history book was written by Miller and divided the history of a Rajput period, Muslim period, and the British period, not the Christian period. Interestingly about it.
Yes.
And the first history of Gujarat, written by Forbes, was considered to be modernist. He did the same kind of things about it. And now this is a model and the idea for those who are propagating Hindutva and highlighting the particular, not contextualize what happened there.
Right.
It's not that nothing happened. What happened to that is not. So the critical faculties, reflections, not among the masses, but also we also start thinking about it and critically look into it, why we have gone wrong about it. You are absolutely right.
Absolutely, absolutely. That criticality is central and crucial if we were to understand the root of the crisis and the crisis which had particularly surrounded us at this point in time. I have the last, not least, the last question that I have is particularly that you have a long history of not simply research and publications, but you have been very closely associated with teaching, pedagogy, and teaching and pedagogy of different forms. Even you were at the National Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy. And the occasions when there has been a very close interface between teaching for social science and teaching for administration. Both you handled and handled with considerable dexterity and elan. My curiosity would be that what do you think has been the major change when you started your career as a teacher, somebody who's been, teaching at the higher education institution, and what change that you see over these years, that you have also grown in your role as a teacher? What changes do you see which are kind of things which are of concern for you, that which you note with considerable concern, the changes and things that are happening. Of course, I am not pinpointing the question of, that mindless neoliberalization, which has also brought in this whole idea of, marketization of education and number of private higher education institutions which are increasing and mushrooming and almost now kind of characterizing India's academic space, higher education institution, and gradually the declining role of public universities. Uh, so, you being someone who had looked at India of one kind, where the public had certain very distinct, position, to a scenario today when you see that that public is not that public anymore. Uh, so, what do you think has the change that you would note with much concern in this whole business of pedagogy and education that has been happening? Number one, and with respect to that, how do you look at the new education policy? That would be my last kind of uh, query before you for placed for your consideration.
Uh, your questions are important, but frankly, I don't have very clear answers about it. But I have a tentative uh, kind of a points to make. Uh, One is, again, come back to the life work of the teachers. As not, in fact, in my college and university days, we had a small class. MA, we were the 8 students. BA, we were about 16 students and that kind of a thing. So we had a close interaction with the teachers. That scenario changed thereafter, and would be much more than that. The second thing, that the time that you are spending with the students in a classroom is limited. You're raising questions, but the prejudices are so strong, so they may not raise the questions to you. But out of, say, 10 students, at least one raised the questions. And that is my experience at JNU, where I was the full-time teacher. There was the visiting kind of a thing, so it was very limited kind of thing. And I taught Baroda University, political sociology. There I had some interactions with that, and that could influence few students about it. Influence means raising new questions, kind of a thing about it. Uh, uh, so that is the overall uh, students' own. Again, I go back to kind of a socializations and life and that kind of a thing about. The second thing, I also, out of some compulsions, I, I was involved in the education studies of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. And I directed this for 5 years. I spent time to coordinate the state directors. And not only that, to make them write a good report, but also publish something. And I could publish the 2 volumes, edited volumes, including that kind of a thing. I would say that, with all modesty, when those who are concerned for the oppressed among the teachers, we do not have a time to spend for weak students who are coming from a different background. But the teachers also say that prejudices about it. And therefore, when I did this 5 years study, involvement on this kind of a thing, I spent a lot of time with the project directors, make them to write twice, 3, 4 times about it. And some of them drop out also. It's not that I succeeded everybody about it. But at least out of a 20, I could really motivate 10 of them and do this kind of. And I also made them a co-editor with my volumes. So that gives them importance about that kind of thing. So that is uh, commitment. I don't know how this commitment comes, but as I say, I began my career with out of issues, and I took the education study out of a compulsion, uh, kind of a thing about it, or a health study. When this thing happened, health was not my area, but I did it because I thought that this is my city and this happened. We should do this kind of thing. But and all these studies really helped me. See. One of the important things that really stuck to me, or that they never occurred to me earlier in that form, was the hegemony. While doing the study of education, the French sociologists talk about the hegemony and education, Bourdieu and others. Uh, I found that is very important. For me, a lot of learning. I have to read and see the Indian context. And also, in one organization called Nirantar, they did an analysis of the textbooks. Well, I think they have published 5 or 6 state textbooks. Bengal is one, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and that kind of a thing. That considered how the textbooks are male chauvinist. Because these are the female organizations, so they focus on that. And they have brought out very well that kind of a thing. And that applies to the education also. And kind of a values, whatever you say that, and to it, the kind of a textbook that is, whatever the rosy pictures and ideas that a new education policy has, the kind of a textbook written, a kind of syllabus introduced and omitted. That makes a lot of difference about it, because the younger generations learn from this kind of thing. And then I find that we have the limitations. Because education, now at least in Gujarat, I know that most of the colleges and most of the universities are the private universities. So they have their own agenda in kind of thing. And the public universities are least funded. Some of the positions are not filled up and that kind of thing. And what is true of Gujarat, I assume is true for all other states about kind of thing.
Yes.
That kind of institutional change that have come, we are unable to do it. But we should certainly raise questions to our students. Because the present students are the most vulnerable. Despite their all efforts, they know and face more insecurity as soon as they do graduations or post-graduations. Not to speak about the jobs of that liking, but also a job which provides them security.
Right. Absolutely.
Majority of the institutions don't provide, even education institutions don't provide the security. And therefore they always feel insecure. And that insecurity prevent. And if I would have been in that place, I would have also the victim of that kind of a thing. And in that situation, this is a Herculean task for all of us.
It indeed is.
Yeah.
It indeed is.
Really intervene, find ways and means to raise the questions about it. Say in Gujarat, and I'm sure must be.
Yes, absolutely.
The dissent voice in a university is not allowed. And
yes.
there
Right
is a fear also.
Yes.
That if teacher teaches something in the classroom,
Yes.
He's not sure that tomorrow something else will happen.
Yes. Yes. That's the fear.
Yeah.
And that's the vulnerability of our time. And with that, we kind of come to the end of this uh, long session, Professor Shah. I'm indeed thankful to you for suffering this interview for such a long session and suffering my queries, which are often incessant. But it's been a pleasure interacting with you, having your thoughts recorded at the Indian Sociological Society's end. And particularly, it's an honor for me to be able to carry out this interview on behalf of the Indian Sociological Society. And it's a rare opportunity to be able to talk to someone who I had, grown up reading. Particularly, I'm reminded of my classes back in my university at Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru University, those days when we did classes on social movements. Professor Ghanshyam Shah was somebody who crept into our mind and sat very quietly. And something that now today I look back with much nostalgia. So once again, thank you so much for taking your time out to share some of your very valuable thoughts and insights, and a long span of your career dotted with such immense achievements. I'm indeed thankful to Indian Sociological Society for making this possible. Uh, with that, we close this session. Professor Shah, thanks once again for being here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for Indian Sociological Society, and also a chairperson, Chitraji, who persuaded me. At one point of time,
Yes.
I was hesitant because I'm a political scientist, but she really pushed me, telephoned me immediately. And I'm really happy to talk to you because this also helps me.
Indeed, a pleasure was all mine. And as I said, that it's been an honor for me to be able to care, because I never thought that I would be able to, carry out and conduct this interview with you, who I have read and heard about all this while.